Hello and welcome to the Daily Mirror's Facebook Live. I'm joined by author and body language expert Judi James today. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
So we will be discussing all things royal today and specifically focusing on Prince Harry's news. I mean, so much has happened in the royal world over the past couple of weeks, but you're going to help us break it down today with all the body language and all we know so far. If you guys got any questions, pop them in the comments below and we will get them answered for you today. So obviously a lot has been happening from America coming back to the UK overnight. But let's start with a couple of weeks ago now where we had that big pregnancy announcement. If we can see the picture there. I mean, it's a very, very beautiful photo.
This actually I would now retrospectively describe as the calm before the storm, because this was such a calm shot. I mean, you almost wouldn't realise the fact that it had been taken deliberately. It looked as though they'd been caught by a paparazzi hiding in the bushes, lost with the baby bump showing, trees, grass, and most importantly, Harry's bare feet. I mean, in terms of body language signals, have we ever seen a royal male's bare feet before? I don't think we have.
Actually, that's a very good point. No,
we probably didn't want to see it as well. But that made such a strong statement. I mean, A, he's clearly got a lovely lawn, because if you walked across mine, you'd tread on a nail or something like that. But B, it was showing Harry, who's now escaped to America, as this kind of surrendered to happiness male that possibly goes running barefoot through the grounds like a hippie having the most amazing time. This was showing us Harry living in his best life. I mean,
do you think Harry had a big say about how that photo to be placed? Essentially, does he want to give off, do you think, that image of being very natural and very happy and sort of stripping it back literally to the love, essentially?
I would say that for him would be the ideal message to send out. I mean, he clearly is besotted with Meghan. He clearly, I mean, they were face-gazing one another as though she'd just broken the news about the second pregnancy. But the eye contact and the way that their smiles are very mirrored. I mean, this epitomizes the look of love. So clearly this is the sort of idealistic free life that he wants to show that he's living. It's not the kind of pose that we would have seen while he was in the UK as a role particularly. And by the way, can I just say one thing? I always try out the poses. I didn't go out onto my own lawn and sit under a tree, but if you try Harry's pose, you can actually see it is a bit contrived, because you almost can't do that for very long, sitting down with your legs out with head in lap without needing to be propped up on something. So it's a great pose. I'm sure it was deeply uncomfortable, but it sends out the message of bliss.
Yeah, the message of bliss and of love. Now, obviously, from that moment, we've had a lot more updates, and more updates are coming from across the pond, essentially. So let's start with the James Corden, Prince Harry interview, shall we? I mean, James Corden, I think that's great, obviously British. He's still sort of like having that sort of slight tie to the UK, even though obviously now he's left. And they generally do look like friends talking.
They do, don't they? In fact, I don't know if you noticed, you probably did, they've almost dressed alike. In fact, they've almost dressed like twins. So there was obviously a desire to look like this kind of comedy double act. And for me, that was one of the most fascinating things about Harry's body language, because I think it's difficult to work out with Harry and Meghan exactly what they're looking for in terms of no publicity and privacy. And then we see them doing things like this. So I was fascinated to see exactly what it was that Harry was most enjoying about this interview. And there were certain parts, and particularly with this kind of look, when he was doing this knockabout double act with James Corden, where you could see that he was incredibly relaxed, incredibly happy, and probably enjoying it. He loves, clearly, the idea of being a performer. And that makes him extremely happy. We got a lot of open body language. When he was on the bus, he was doing a lot of leg splaying, which is a kind of now showing off gesture, you know, to show that you're comfortable and confident, etc.
And it's obviously all on his terms as well. I mean, he would obviously be comfortable with the interview, and therefore that kind of shows in his body language. And also, do you think the fact that he's in America as well is completely playing into it? He doesn't feel like he's got, if he was in London, say, it's all on his own terms. And obviously it was on top of the bus as well. So he's almost literally taken himself off the ground, so he can't sort of be seen by onlookers apart from obviously the camera.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and it was interesting because James Corden can be a difficult interview. I know James is very funny, but he can also almost over tease people. He's not the most easiest person to be interviewed by. I think Harry got quite an easy ride here. But even when they were on the ground, I mean, it was Harry that did the rap. And there was a wonderful gesture that showed me how much Harry was absolutely enjoying the performance and how much he felt in control of everything, which was, I don't know if you remember when he stopped at the Bel Air Fresh Prince house. We got this whole comedy double act of him using the loo, which he was very much, part of that. And then when he comes out, he actually performs a little skip and a jump. He literally jumps in the air. He's dancing with delight. He's like a big kid at this stage. He's absolutely loving every moment of that. And I think if you saw his face when James was speaking to Meghan on the phone, he edges into the background and you can see his face has gone red with pleasure that, Mummy Meghan is actually pleased with what I'm doing here. And, he throws this look of love that is unmistakable again at her. But he seems to be so proud of what he's doing at that point, that it's all going well and he's performing well, etc.
And it's also interesting that Meghan came in for a video call as well, and she wasn't there. He was almost taking control slightly and doing sort of, this is my own thing. Obviously, we're going to have to mention us because of the baby news and, the big move, etc., etc. But he actually was doing it by himself. And when they were on FaceTime together, they obviously are so comfortable with one another now, calling each other's nicknames, etc. Do you think that's the public appearance that they want to give? This look of love, just like the photo.
Yeah, and I a lot of it is very. If I use the word contrived, I don't mean that nastily, but I don't think anything of that just slipped out. And the way, I mean, even the Meghan, if you just get somebody randomly picks up your other half's phone and rings during the day, where are you likely to be? On the loo, washing your hair, not beautifully framed as Meghan was there. I mean, everything was absolutely perfect. So good for her, good for her. But yes, and I think even with the has, and Harry is now, for me, I'm not going back to Harry anymore, it's Has and Meg. But those insights into their relationship that take it further than we saw their in-love body language in the UK, but now they're fleshing themselves out as a couple. It's a little bit like their own little reality show brewing up, but with them in control.
Yeah, in control of their own sort of like script per se. Joanna's got in touch saying, I personally love watching it. It's funny, isn't it? Now that they've left, we don't know a lot about what's going on. So they're kind of giving us small glimpses of their life. And I think people are genuinely still quite interested, even though obviously the news about the royal family and, how they're, permanently, living in America, etc., and how they're sort of slowly cutting off ties. But I think people are still genuinely interested.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously saw a lot of them in the UK, but I think they're fascinating enough. I mean, particularly Meghan, that you a little bit like Diana was, you can almost never get enough of seeing her. I think when you take somebody like Kate is brilliant. She's perfect in her role as a princess, in her job, etc. But there's not that kind of, I really must see more of her. And I think with Meghan and Harry, I think it's a kind of constant with the public that they're not going to tire of seeing them, even when we start to see things like this, because there's so many questions on everything that we've seen over the past few days.
And Meghan had her own life before Harry as well, successful.
She absolutely arrived in the UK as an adult, fully formed, successful woman, which I thought was wonderful. I mean, the royal family have got this very archaic history of bringing these sort of innocent young women that have not been out with anybody else, haven't had a job, etc., and then moulding them into the role of royal. But it was so fascinating to see somebody who did describe themselves as a feminist, who'd already got their own thoughts, their own personality, and probably more confidence than most of the rest of the royals put together. And that was intriguing.
Yeah, and in terms of Meghan now, do you think that she is perhaps only giving what she wants into the relationship and kind of meeting that sort of like halfway with Harry? Because she moved to the UK and now Harry's moved back to obviously more, to her side of the world. So she's actually given up a lot as well in terms of compromise. And can you kind of tell that within the language that they're sort of like equals, that they meet sort of halfway?
I think they've taken it in turns. I mean, I think when Meghan came to the UK, Harry very much saw himself in the role of almost overly protective husband that knew that all hell was going to break loose in terms of press and public interest, and was desperate to protect her, albeit that she presented herself as a very confident woman. I think that vibe is completely changed. And looking at the Oprah Winfrey clip, I think it's even more obvious that now she seems to have taken a much more vulnerable Harry back to the US with her. And she seems to be more in the role of rescuer and protector with him. I mean, this hand gesture that you can see, where he's got his hand on the chair, she's placed her hand on top. That's almost a maternal looking gesture. It's as though it's being used for reassurance and to let him feed off her confidence. I mean, clearly she's friends with Oprah. She's used to being in front of the camera. She's an actress. To Harry, this is a whole new world that he's being judged by and being asked to perform. And it sounds from the clip as though he's going to literally rip his soul out in front of the camera and tell us, about all the
that's
and everything.
Now, the clip that was released, I would say that it is very dramatic. The way that they're teasing it, I mean, they are definitely not the raw way of doing things.
No, when I first watched the clip this morning, I mean, my goodness, the music alone that they've put with that clip and the way that Oprah Winfrey, it's almost as though she's interviewing the princes from the tower, how did you escape? How did you get away from your uncle? It was like real oozing drama. And I thought just that clip alone is going to set the teaspoons rattling in Buckingham Palace. I mean, it's guaranteed. I felt wary, and it's nothing to do with me. It was so heavy and laden with drama. And that, I think, was not particularly coming from Harry and Meghan. It was coming from the production.
Yes.
But what made it perhaps even more dramatic was that Meghan had adopted the role of a silent movie star, or they clipped it to look like that. So Oprah's bombarding her with all this, were you silenced? It sounded like a mafia movie or something. And Meghan is just sitting there looking very demure, almost regal. Very regal, I would say. Very elegant, again, very confident. She's got, if you look here, she's got what's called a pit bearing gesture. She's got the upturned V gap underneath her armpits, which shows a confidence. It's a semi-splay. When we feel that maybe we're being bombarded with difficult questions or we're not comfortable, women in particular, we tend to self-diminish. We bring our arms in. I mean, men do sometimes oversplay to sort of show off. But with Meghan, she's got that super self-controlled, confident image here going on here. But by the way that they've got her saying nothing, it's as though we can guess the answers. And
it makes you to watch it. I mean, no matter what, no matter what you think of their relationship, the body language, that clip just makes you want to hear what they want to say, what they don't say.
Absolutely. I mean, and in fact, it's all led by Oprah, isn't it? I mean, she's throwing these questions out. Nothing really. I mean, Harry and Meghan's looking very cool about the whole thing. She has got that same or a similar slightly enigmatic smile that Diana did in the Martin Bashir interview. It's that it's that slight sort of, well, you know, I could tell a few stories. However, it's not the same body language as Diana in terms of with Diana. It was all the eyes. It was the tragedy eyes, you know, that made her look so vulnerable.
That's the difference. She's got Harry next to her. She's got her.
Yeah, listen, I think she'd be fine alone. You know, I don't think she needs anybody. I think she looks totally fine here, and her eyes, if anything, are slightly narrowed. So she's not doing tragic, vulnerable. She's doing, you know, who she is. She's a confident woman.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the many reasons why, you know, Harry did fall in love with her, because she's so confident, she's so her own woman, she so does her own thing. And it's interesting they went with Oprah and obviously James Corden, as you said, two friends, where they, you know, how they feel so comfortable around people, and that's probably going to show in the interview. And they might say a couple of things. I'm sure. I don't know, but I can imagine it was very heavily thought out before they gave it.
I've got, my life has gone on hold until the 7th of March. I think I barely dare breathe. But yeah, Harry, on the other hand, I have to say, and we can see it in the still here even.
He's leaning towards Meghan, isn't he? He's like,
much less self-assured. He's sitting diagonally. I mean, he's obviously walked in at some point. I would have needed to be wheeled in, actually, if it was me. But he's walked in. He's kind of looks a lot more awkward, and he's doing this male pose. He's got his hand between his legs. It's called the fig leaf pose, and it's a very self-protective barrier. Clearly hiding the crotch, and you know, whereas he was all on full display with James Corden being this kind of real, you know, blokey thing, here he looks way more guarded, a lot more uncomfortable, and probably very much in need of that reassuring hand clasp that he's getting from Meghan.
And do you think that they want to, by their body language, and obviously only giving very specific interviews at the moment, do you think that they want to be role models in the public eye, or by removing themselves now away from the royal family, do you think that perhaps they don't want to be role models and they just want to carry on with their service in their own way?
Do you know, that is such an interesting question, Pandora, and that's one of the reasons why in the James Corden interview I was so interested in Harry's body language, because we're hearing two different strands, really, two completely different stories. On the one hand, Harry was kind of saying, no, you know, we haven't we've stepped away, not stepped down, looking as though he still wanted to continue all of that work and still be seen as very much a member of the royal family. But then we saw his body language a bit later on when he was talking about the royals, and he did a very extravagant, he leant back and sort of, oh, yeah, back over there. He was referring to the UK and I think in the conversation, the royal family to a certain extent, or his work, with a very dismissive and distancing gesture that implied to me more that he was looking to start his own life in the US, and that it wouldn't really be particularly linked. So it's very much a contrast that's coming from it. I would almost argue that he's not sure yet, that there's kind of certain intentions, but at the same time, I think he's doing so well out there, probably, you know, and his power base is increasing. And as he said, let's face it, his goals aren't small. He said, oh, I want to make the world a better place, you know, that's quite a big goal. And I think to a certain extent that with this claim of, we want to bring compassion, we want to make the world a better place, I think in a way he's probably seeing himself as moving forward and onward, and that's more and more there.
He's set the path, and now he just needs to go forward with it, and really, you know, do sort of make the steps and make it happen, and which is what he's doing. And he's obviously having an amazing time out there. Otherwise, I'm sure he would come back to the UK, and I'm sure that they would have a good life here too.
Well, I think in America they probably would take, I hate to say it, but they would take the roles more seriously maybe than we do over here. I think in a way, even people that adore the royal family, there's always this slight spitting image impression of them. You know, I don't think that that they will campaign, and we will hear things, and there will be things like the Queen the other day absolutely saying, "Get your jab." You know, it's almost like, don't be stupid, get your jab.
You had to go to sort of see the royal wedding celebrations and stuff, and see how many Americans flew over, and camped outside.
I mean, funnily enough, it's weird, isn't it? Because, you know, we're obviously, we've got the royals, we have to sort of bow, curtsy when we see them. But I think there's a sort of quiet lack of respect for the royals over here. I think we see them as a bit of an indulgence, and they're interesting, etc. We don't take them that seriously. But I think in America, they probably, I think Harry will probably be taken a lot more seriously, and everything that comes out of his mouth will probably be evaluated, you know, with perhaps more respect than it might be over here.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and I cannot wait until this comes out. We can talk about it further and go more into it then. But thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Pandora.
Yeah, thank you.